Hey everyone, and welcome back to the AI and Humans podcast. I'm your host at Mazor, Kario, product design and AI expert, and the creator of an online leaders program, Unlocking the Power of Generative AI. And today, we're taking a deep dive into the world of venture capital and its vital role in driving innovation in the AI space. Joining us is Perry Pound, a seasoned VC partner with extensive experience in investing in AI startups. We'll be exploring in the landscape of AI investment and key trends shaping the industry and the strategies for spotting the next big thing in AI. Get ready for the conversation packed with insightful perspective from the world of venture capital. Hi, Perry.
Adi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Perry?
Good. It's always nice to see you.
Always nice to see you, and I'm sure it's going to be really interesting, right?
That's right.
Now we can start. What are the current hot areas in investment in the AI space and what makes them so attractive to VC?
Well, I think, and I would say, speaking as somebody who knows Adi a little bit, I know she's an expert in AI as well, and so I'm happy to be on the podcast, and also would always want to turn it back to her for her insights. But
Sure.
basically, like everybody else, we understand, generative AI, but it's the application of AI right now. So whether it's healthcare, whether it's climate tech, whether it's defense tech, space tech, I think the companies that succeed are going to be the companies that are able to apply the tools of AI in new and different ways. And so we're always on the lookout for those opportunities. And I think every quarter exponentially, you're going to see more of an application to AI into different pieces in different sectors.
Right. And in general, I think the foundational LLMs are already built. Maybe the last one would be Elon Musk's one. And
That's
other
right.
than that, it's going to be like smaller, very focused niche models that we'll see. And I think the implications of that is that people would want to see solutions for a specific domain. So, what would be like the main types of domains you think that AI would be there?
Well, I think you're going to see you're going to see so many different domains. I was on the phone. I've been on the phone with a lot of different groups right now. So after this, I have a pitch from a space tech group using AI. Last week, and we're talking to somebody that has an ed tech AI. I talked to somebody yesterday with a fintech AI. So, and this isn't even, because we're working on our to raise the fund at the same time as we're starting to deploy. And so this isn't even trying hard to go find these opportunities. Opportunities are coming to us from the network. And they're all, so far, they're all very interesting opportunities. The things that people are doing are fascinating. So I think from a VC perspective, you're sort of trying to, if you think back to several years ago, right? And looking at technologies and saying, okay, you're always looking around the corner, right? So what's coming up next? What are some of the challenges that might make the technology that we're working with obsolete, right? With AI, I would say that's exponential. So
Yeah.
you're looking around the corner. I think the existential threat is within the companies you're investing in. Or the threat is what makes this unique enough that one of the larger companies is not able just to keep it for themselves, right? Or
Right.
do a better job with it. So that's
Yeah.
sort of I think that's a challenge for all the smaller AI builders. So some of them are saying like, well, we don't see, one of the big groups even wanting to do this because it's so niche, right? This would be kind of a waste of their efforts. It wouldn't be big enough.
Yeah.
Um, so it's
That
it,
makes
it's
sense.
it's fascinating right now. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that another aspect would be, do they have the data that is very specific for this domain?
right.
Let's say it's like a company that is like an insurance company that has so much data related to their specific needs, and then it's very hard to compete with that because they have something that big companies don't really have.
That's right. That's right. Do you have the data? And so, part of it is I think if you look at some of the smaller companies, they're working hard in some cases, not even really raising money yet, just trying to get clients, right? And by getting clients, and the more clients they get, the more data they'll get. And
Right.
so it's a big it's very capital intensive for some of these groups. So you see some high net worth people really saying, okay, I'm going to put in millions of dollars with just maybe they have one partner founder who has a high net worth. The whole point is to go out and create the data first, before going out and really competing at scale. So
Yeah.
that's definitely an approach.
Yeah, only when they have the data, they could have something which they could compete with. Before
That's
that,
right.
it's very hard to compete because these big models, they know a lot and they have lots of data within them. And if it's not very
100%.
specific, it's like what is the value that you're bringing to the table after all?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So what are the biggest challenges and opportunities that VCs face when investing in AI startups?
I think one of the things is I mean, we just touched on it a little bit, right? And we
Yeah,
said, it's like
what they call data moat. This is how they
right.
call that you need enough data, right?
That's right. That's right. That I think the for VCs, there's a technical complexity, right? That to understanding what's going to make a good investment and what's not. So, like on our team, we've got somebody who had a lot of experience with LLMs prior to GPTs, and now he's able to dig in from more of an expertise perspective than some. I mean, certainly than me, right? I'm fortunate to be learning from him on this. I think also the regulatory risks, right?
Right,
So
right.
right now we're trying to it's a very fine line. There's a book I read recently called The Conservative Futurist, and it's a book on policy. And so this is a guy that works at the American Enterprise, think tank, right, in DC. And so he was saying, if you go back to the 70s, so the US had an economic growth rate of about 5% in the 60s. And then in the 70s, we came up with a lot of different regulations. And he was saying it wasn't that the regulations were so bad, like who doesn't want clean air and who doesn't want clean water, right?
Sure.
It was more like the ability of uh, small groups of people to stop development.
Yeah.
You might, in real estate development, they call it NIMBYs, right? Not in my backyard
Yeah,
people.
yeah, right.
But that happened kind of across the board. And so if you say, if we did something similar today and we stopped or slowed down growth too much, he was saying we went from 5% to 2%. And so he said, if you just kind of carry it across, right, the average income now in the US, instead of being 70,000, would be 300,000. So he
Mm,
said it really slowed down opportunities for a lot of people. And there's that risk where you want to have smart regulations that don't inhibit the potential and don't slow down the human flourishing. And at the same time, you really have to focus on the alignment challenge, right? And so understanding
yeah.
the regulatory risks, we're based in Washington D.C. and then we also have a base in a secondary base in California. So I think we're close to a lot of the creators in California, but we're also close to the policy in DC, and we have a pretty good network there of people working in Congress and people working in think tanks and working in technology labs. And so we're watching that all the time. Like, how is that unfolding? You know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and then I think from
I
another standpoint, you're looking at competition, right? Like we talked about
right.
before. What allows your group to go versus another investment you might make on behalf of your investors that just gets eaten up, you know. And
Right.
so we talked a little bit about how you try to avoid that. So I
Yeah.
think those are some of the key metrics and issues.
Yeah. I think what you said about the regulation. So, on one side, everybody wants a responsible AI and regulations that would somehow have some kind of guardrails to this technology.
Right.
On the other hand, if it's very specific, smaller companies would not be able to just rely on these regulations. And the big ones who are already winning, it's like a Google, Microsoft, and maybe another player like Claude would always win because they have the resources in order to apply these regulations and all the legal help they need in order to have really responsible AI. So
That's
it's
right.
like the balance between the small competition, companies, startups using these regulations in order to grow and not be too risky. On the other
That's right.
hand, it's like you don't want them to die just because they need so much help and resources in order to stand up to these, right?
That's right.
Which is it's very problematic to have all these regulations when you're just starting. You just want it to work, and
That's
then
right.
just to think
That's right.
about how to make it work with all these additional barriers, it's really hard.
That's right. That's right. That's why
Yeah.
it's exciting some of the work that the way that OpenAI started. and I don't know if it's, they've had an exodus to some people recently, but the way they started, the Anthropic team, for instance, is really focused on the alignment challenge, and they have a lot of the early OpenAI guys that were focused on the alignment challenge. I think these people know so much more, and so having sort of regulations that run through that group, and obviously you have to look at self-interest if you're a for-profit business, which makes it challenging. But
Yeah,
I think
of
there's some really
course.
good people over there thinking about things in the right way.
Yeah. It started as an open source. That's why they're called OpenAI. And, all the stuff that Elon Musk said that he invested in a nonprofit and now they're totally
Right.
for profit and part of Microsoft. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, there is this I think that he's suing Sam Altman, but I'm not sure about it. And it's all related to that because it's so powerful. And
So powerful.
giving
Yeah.
this power to a few people on earth, they might be the most smart people ever, but it's at least it's not proportionate to the amount of power they have in their hands. So
That's
it's
right.
hard
And,
to manage.
absolutely. And then when you stop and think there are 8 billion people on Earth right now, right? But only a few people have the technology. It's really pretty shocking from a historical standpoint.
Right. And it's so wide and pervasive, and it's going to change so many domains in so many areas. And it makes you think about how to distribute this kind of power and how to even balance it in a way. And in general, I had a few people talking about responsible AI, my last few episodes was dedicated to that.
Oh, great. I've got to
and
listen.
and for me, it's I don't really trust the regulations and the legal authorities to do that, because we see what's going on in social media. And it's
Yeah.
20 years that we have Facebook, more or less, and
Right.
nothing really substantial was really done there. Right. Although
Right.
we already know there are implications on society, whatever, and on
Right.
young people, and nothing
Right.
really changed. Right. They're doing whatever they want.
Yeah.
So do you
And
think it's going to be different in
so
that
many
case?
fake news stories, right? Just
Yeah.
I said fake news stories. I felt like Donald Trump for a second, but truly, really false stories. And I remember in the '90s, people were talking about they were talking about moral relativism. Do you remember that? And so people were talking about moral relativism and the problem that it could be and all that kind of and so we hit it with social media, right? Because people go,
Yeah.
well, they start to say, well, I don't know if that's true, and then some will say, well, it's true for me. Well, this other thing is true for me, and now all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're getting away from objectivity, right? And so
Right.
but they still haven't solved that, to your point, and that's a lot simpler uh, thing it would seem to solve than the guardrails around the use of artificial intelligence.
Of course. And if we're taking that already, that we are questioning what's truth, and it's very easy to create images and videos which are not really, and it's hard to understand that they're AI and not real. It's really hard for us to understand what's truth and what's not.
That's right.
And therefore, the implications, other than the fact it could change our workforce and it could change the way that we do things and decision making, just the way that we perceive reality is going to change.
That's right.
It's not that I don't trust Sam Altman or any other entrepreneurs
Right.
out doing that, but it's too
Sure.
much to handle for someone.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what are some key metrics that VCs would look at when they're evaluating AI startups?
Well, and I think probably most people in the most people that listen to your podcast would have heard a lot of these, right? But you always want to look
Mhm.
at the team, right? What's the experience of the team? How long has the team been together, right? Do they have a history of working together? Peter Thiel talks about, I think in the book Zero to One, he talks about looking at teams. And if somebody went to a networking event and met someone and said, I think we should start a company together, he said, it's probably not a good bet, right?
Yeah,
It
right.
always makes me laugh, right?
Yeah,
Because he says that a lot. But I think that, understanding that, right? Starting there, who's the team? And then what experience do they bring? Do they have the experience to be able to roll this out? Now, you don't always need deep experience like from the leader within a domain, right? If you look at Elon Musk with SpaceX, he'd not been he wasn't a rocket scientist, right? But he was able to look at it from an entrepreneurial perspective. What's the biggest cost? The rocket. Okay, how do you how do you cut down on the cost, make it reusable? How do you make it reusable? And then he found the team though to be able to create the reusable rocket, right? And then he focused on bringing the cost down.
Yeah.
Obviously, he came close to failing a couple of times.
Yeah.
Is competent and as smart and as capable as he is. So I think
He's
that
very smart. Did you see the interview with him?
which one?
The last one he had with Jordan Peterson, 2 hours.
No, no, I have not seen it yet.
You
That's on my
should.
list.
It's a really good interview, and you see that he was very smart even as a kid, which is
Yeah,
like
he was.
amazing. He said that he read all the scriptures when he was like 11. And I
Smart.
have a kid who's 11. I'm telling you, he's not really interested in that.
Yeah, no, I know. I remember I read the whole. I read the all the scriptures at like 18. Because somebody had it was my dad had a book called it was like the chronological Bible or something.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm just gonna read this because it broke it down into days, and so it was like we were all making New Year's resolutions, and so I looked
Yeah.
at it and I said, well, I'll read this year. Very interestingly, if you look at the Old Testament compared to the New Testament, right, the Torah plus the other books compared to the New Testament, 10 and a half months was the Old Testament. Only
Hmm.
6 weeks is the New Testament. Kind of crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it
And,
is.
and Moses took up in that book, just the sections on Moses took up 10 weeks. So longer, just what was written about Moses was longer than the entire New Testament.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was fascinating, right?
Yeah, it is.
The
And
way it's
I think
broken up.
that he read the Quran too, if I'm not mistaken. He read everything. And he
I
said
did not
that
read that.
me neither. But I think that what he mentioned is that he has this kind of a crisis that he felt that he needed to understand the world when he was 11. So it's like, of course, he is a bit smarter than most people, or a bit like deeper and see things differently. I
Yes.
would imagine that
Yes.
it's very hard to find an entrepreneur like Elon Musk, mostly. And I would imagine, like, when you're having a deep tech technology,
Right.
some of these startups would use a third party, and they're just really using a model that is already built, a foundational model. But if they're building a model themselves, they really need to understand deep technology. Do you see these people as different kind of entrepreneurs, or they're just any other technology and it doesn't really matter?
I think when you're thinking about deep tech technology, yeah, I see them a little bit differently in terms of they, I think a lot of people who are attracted by this, by the field of technology would aspire to be in deep tech related to the technology itself, right? So, like, what problem can I solve? How do I solve it? I think what happens or what has happened, and I'm not the first person to say this by any means, this is a common, this is sort of a conventional answer, but I think a lot of people have focused on what's the fastest way to scale, right? Scalability is important. It's
Right.
important to, otherwise you may not have a business. And even Elon Musk, I'll just interject this quickly. The first thing he did was Zip2, right? So he says he put the yellow pages or the phone book on the internet in 1995 and then sold it and made about 22 million. But he would say, like, what a dumb business that was. But he had to
Yeah,
get started, right? And then
sure.
he could go to PayPal. And then from PayPal, he could go into SpaceX and Tesla. But I think that there's this there's the business component. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs that get into the business side and they're working on some of the solutions related to putting something on the internet back in the day, or then putting it on the smartphone, or then creating an app and those kinds of things. They are pulling together technical expertise, understanding of finance, understanding of business, and there are a lot of very smart people in that space. But when you're going to the next level and you're saying, I want to create a technology that will really move the needle, that takes somebody with a much higher tolerance for risk, an understanding of not just the implications of building the technology, but also the time frame. So how do you project engineer something? How do you project manage something? How do you deal with long time frames, supply chain issues, regulatory issues? You're getting into more of a complicated space. I had a background in real estate development and renewable energy as well, and just the regulatory issues you face in those fields. Think about building an apartment building. It takes you 7 years in LA to find the
Hmm.
site, go all the way through to where you have leased up the site and now you're putting it into a portfolio or you're selling it. 7 years of your life. So
Wow.
think of that's like almost 2 high school or college. That's like going all the way
Yeah.
through high school, having your kid go all
Yeah.
the way through high school, almost all the way through college
Yeah.
before the
It's
deal's.
like two or three startups,
That's right.
one after
That's
the
right.
consecutive
It's
ones.
silly, right? It's kind of silly,
Yeah.
and it's not even a new technology. You're building a building. People have been doing it for a couple thousand years, few thousand years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Silly. So I think that I think that's the deep tech person has the patience, the foresight, the long range view to be able to do that. And it's pulling together a lot of different disciplines in one person who can then recruit and inspire a team. So they have to be visionary, but they also have to you have to believe them, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Of
people
course. It's hard.
believe Elon Musk,
Yeah. That
but
he
not
knows what
everybody.
he's doing
That's right. That's right.
before he gets to be Elon Musk, you mean? Because
That's
right
right.
now, when he could do whatever he wants and everybody would just believe him. But
Well, there are a couple stories that you might have heard when he did the Zip2 program and he was building saying he was going to put people on the internet. From what I understand, and I've seen it in a couple of books. The most recent being Walter Isaacson's book on Elon Musk. There was a story where he built what they called like the supercomputer, and really it was just a computer. If you heard this, it was just a computer like in a frame, and they painted it black, the frame, and so it looked. And they'd roll it around like, well, we're going to upload you into this. It was a prop, right?
yeah,
But people go, wow, the supercomputer. So if you owned a bar or a few restaurants and you didn't really know much about the internet, it was the '90s. You'd think, well, this guy knows, right?
yeah,
So that's a business, like a marketing savviness, right? Or when he was lobbying on space tech on SpaceX to the Congress, right? There was an event at the Smithsonian that he went to, and he parked an 18-wheeler with the old dead rocket that spray painted SpaceX on the side out in front of the Smithsonian. So people drove by and said, "Oh my gosh, he's got a rocket there. They're legit, right?"
yeah,
The rocket wouldn't fly at that point, but it's
yeah,
that sense of marketing savvy where people say, "Well, he's doing it. There it is. There's
yeah.
the product, right?"
Yeah, he
You know,
knows how to do it. That's for sure. And I think what you said about deep tech is the type of entrepreneurs that needs this long-term vision. Long-term in startups, it's like more than 3 years, more or less. Like 3 years is like the top of a startup. You need to do something and to show growth within this like 2 or 3 years time span. And when you're thinking that you need to invest the time, efforts, resources, to build something which is substantial, especially if it's a big model. Right now,
that's
when
right.
we're talking about smaller models, you don't need that because you already have open source models or third
Right.
party foundational models. So you don't need that, but you need a way to understand reality a bit differently and a set of skills that is different than other entrepreneurs. But I'm just wondering, you said about the team when they're coming over. Do you
Hmm.
look for the interactions between the founders? Do you see how they talk to each other, if they relate differently, or you really ask them, where did you meet? What did you do? All of that.
You ask them very directly, yeah, and then you kind of watch how they work together, and you're looking for a set of complementary skills, and you really can. I mean, I'm not saying I've broken it down and spelled it out, but if if you look at personality theory, and I know this has been some people have criticized it in recent years, the idea of personality theory because we're all unique, and it's true. We're
Yeah.
all unique, right? However, if you were to take like the Myers-Briggs type indicator, right? It's a pretty simple one, or the DISC, right? Dominant, influencer, supportive, conscientious, right? And say like, or the Enneagram, right? You can look at these different personality theories and say, okay, that person, that person builds tech. That they're that type. They're a craftsperson, right? On the Myers Briggs, that person is a salesperson. This other person is a visionary thinker. This other person is a concrete, detail-oriented thinker. You want to see the complementary set of skills across a team. In other words, if you just had two visionaries and they both like to talk a lot and they both like to plan out their vision, but nobody's executing the details, that
Yeah.
wouldn't make a good team, right?
Yeah.
That's not likely to happen, but it happens sometimes, right?
Yeah. And
So
vice versa. If you just in the
vice versa.
details.
That's right. Like we built the best code ever. Okay, who's the client? I don't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just talked to a startup exactly that. They're very professional. They have like professors in their team and they are into the details and they have no one to just view the other side. Like, who are you
Yes,
selling to? How do you sell it? And
that's right.
they're so enthusiastic about the technology. Like they
Oh yeah.
really love it, which is
Oh yeah.
great, but it's not enough, right? So
No, it's
they
not
have
enough.
a
And
very good
oftentimes,
solution, but
yeah, oftentimes you find because I've been in the situation before too when people have approached me to help them with their startup or something. Sometimes you find in that case that because they have a history of developing the technology, but they can't sell it to anybody. They don't know how to bring it online. They don't know how to scale the company. They don't know how to raise money. They don't know how to do any of these things. So they're sitting with that technology, but they'll say, well, we own, the majority of this. We're not really going to share it with other people. Sales is easy. Go
yeah,
sell,
it's like
right? You know what I mean?
it's not that important as we are
Not that
very
important.
smart and they are not.
We're very
Like,
smart. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh, those guys, they're terrible and whatever. But you see, if
yeah,
like even now, I can look back from a few years ago. They haven't done anything yet. They continue to have meetings,
yeah,
and then they talk to people, and then people go, okay, but they haven't really made any headway.
yeah.
Which is
In
unfortunate.
general, I come from UX and design and product, so I'm not a technical person. And I started way, way back that we just had startups with only technical people. It's like these are the
Oh,
startups we met back then. They didn't
yeah,
have product for sure. They didn't have like marketing and sales. Maybe they added someone that will do the whatever is needed in order to sell. That's it. And
right,
in the beginning, you felt that they are so sure of themselves and they
right,
know everything. It was kind of a fight to persuade them that there is something more than the technology. And
right.
everything changed, and now if you don't have a good branding, if you don't have a good story, if you cannot sell, if you're not focusing on your users, and like Steve Jobs saying everything is for the end users and all of that, if you
Hmm.
don't have all these additional functions within your company, you have no way, because the competition is much harder.
That's right,
You have no way, and I think that these very smart people are more balanced in a way, and maybe I hope their ego is a bit like smaller
right,
because they know
right,
you cannot make it just to have very smart people around. It's like a
right,
smart, cognitive, analytical people, whatever.
right, right. That's right.
It's not
That's right. I
enough.
think Steve Jobs is a great example of that.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
totally into marketing and understanding technology. It's like
right,
a visionary.
right.
How can AI startups best pitch their ideas to VCs and secure funding? What would be your
I think
tips?
and this goes back, I think, to there are the typical questions, right, that a VC would want to hear. Like, what's
Yeah,
your, problem statement? Like, what
yeah,
problem are you solving that's unique? And then why is that the main problem? Why are you the right team to solve that specific problem? How big is the market for that problem, right? And obviously, people get this wrong all the time. I remember during the clean tech, the first clean tech wave, right? Before clean tech's not so it's more energy now, right? So you would say like clean energy, right? It's not really a technology anymore because it's been adopted at scale. And so now you would say, well, that's that operates more like there's a engineering and development component, there's a construction component, there's an energy component, right? I think at the beginning they were going to VCs and they were saying, hey, what's the market for energy? It's the whole world, and so it's infinite. It's like,
yeah,
well, no, because you're not putting in there all the different types of energy and like who's going to adopt your energy and why are they going to pay more for your energy, and it's obvious in hindsight for all of us, right? But at the
yeah,
time, you remember like 07, 2007, it was like, wow, right? And it was exciting. It was exciting, and I think we're going to hit that again. We'll hit that again with nuclear fusion at some point. But I think based on the experience of '07, a lot of people, at least who were in business at that time, will remember kind of the story, right? Like, well, how do you adopt it? How do you facilitate bringing it in? So those questions, and then you're looking at go to market strategy. You're looking at how do you scale up the business over time, right? And you also need to think about what's the game plan in the future, right? Is it going to what are the different like where do you want to end up, you know, at the end? You start there and then you come back to what's your minimum viable product and how do you keep
Yeah.
it going and nurture it and grow it over time. So
Yeah.
I always think of like, okay, start with a clear vision and then come back and like, well, how do you get to next quarter to next quarter to next quarter and how do you ramp up? And then who do you need on the team as you go and what resources do you need? And then you also want to look for resilience in the founding team. So are they
Yeah.
going to hang in there when the going gets tough? And you have to think about all kinds of things related to life because nobody's just a worker, right? Everybody has a whole life, and then
Sure.
what are the effects on the culture over time? How does a company stabilize over time? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think what you said about the last part is looking for flexibility of these people because they surely would have some kind of barriers and challenges on the way, and maybe they need to pivot and maybe they need to change things. And are they aware of these unknowns and how to tackle them, or even thinking about the unknowns is enough? You don't
Yeah,
know it's an unknown. But
yeah,
I think that what you
right,
mentioned about like everybody could use it is a way of not taking really responsibility, right? Because if you're saying it's for everyone, it's just saying like nobody's going to use it. The same thing because you're
right,
not really focusing
right.
on who's this market that you're addressing. And the
That's
same
right.
goes
Yeah,
like if it's like yeah, the path is going to be ABC and not taking into consideration that you might have additional circumstances, it means that you're not really thinking it thoroughly and you're not really ready to take on this really big chance of being an entrepreneur, ups and downs. If they're experienced, they surely know it, but if they're young and very enthusiastic, sometimes they miss it.
right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, and
What
then
are
yeah. Oh,
yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's okay, I'm listening, sorry.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, there's all the trade-offs, right? It's
Right.
very nuanced. So when you're young, you have new ideas and you have optimism and more energy sometimes to pursue them. You're not fighting against uh, the ghosts of the past, right? Where something didn't work out or something didn't go the way you thought. Those kinds of things. On the
Right.
other hand,
Right.
when you're and there's a really good book on this. It's called Super Founders. Have you read that?
No,
It's by
no.
Ali Thomasib. He's a VC over at DC VC, and he wrote this book where he studied like all these founders, and so he said that there's a myth around like all the founders are 20. He was saying
Yeah.
most founders are like 40s, 50s, right? And they've been in major companies. They've gone through several cycles. A lot of them bootstrap to a certain level before then they bring in the first round of funding after they have a product. He was saying that's more the normal thing that you'll see, but the
Really?
news is always on. Wow, look at Snapchat or Zuckerberg or
Yeah,
those
these
kinds of things.
guys.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I think the question is a successful entrepreneur, not only an entrepreneur. In
yes,
order to be successful, you need, as you mentioned, resilience is something that you
yeah,
get with age. It's very hard to
right.
be resilient when you're 20.
That's right.
And of course, the knowledge, experience that you bring to the table is very important as a person. How to relate to your team, how to decide who could be your partner, how to decide how to recruit the right people. Understanding the domain is very important. If you don't have enough knowledge, it will take you so long just to understand what you're building for, what is the competitive landscape, so forth. And if you have a
That's
few
right.
years in this specific domain, you have so much more advantages than someone who was, yeah, I know how to be an entrepreneur. Maybe I started entrepreneurship and I'm very enthusiastic and I have lots of energy, but much of these, like the energy could just be wasted and
That's right.
not really consumed in a good way, for
That's
sure.
right.
So, what are some of the emerging trends and challenges that VC anticipate in the AI investment landscape?
I think one of the things that people are, I mean, we already touched on the ethics in AI and the alignment challenge. We didn't touch on the fact that there is this idea of a talent shortage in AI.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, people are trying to ramp up quickly and understand it better. But if you're looking at that next level of talent, some of the VCs I'm sorry, some of the entrepreneurs I've talked to don't really have any experience at all in AI at this point. So
Right.
they're, the challenge there is you're building on top of, somebody else's system. So, well, we're using OpenAI and we're prompting it this way. And okay, what's your background? And well, I was in mortgage banking, but we're going to
Right.
use it for those kinds of clients. Okay, great. But who's on the technical side on your team that's doing this, right? So I think there is a bit of a talent shortage there, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the risk there obviously is that they'll miss something, you know. And so I think that's one of the challenges. I think that one of the trends would be this idea of edge AI, right? And so models deployed on devices, right, and the Internet of Things, those sorts of applications, people are really starting to focus because there is a trend, which obviously is going to catch on. Again, the growth in AI is exponential. So by
Yeah.
several months from now, it won't even be a trend. It'll be like
Yeah.
part of AI, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
I have it's, I'm not sure, but when I'm thinking about edge devices, I'm thinking about Apple. And,
mhm,
it seems
yeah.
like they're on the sidelines, but they're not.
Mhm.
And when they come like fully in a full energy into this race, I don't know they're going to leave everyone behind with the devices and the hardware and all of that.
That's right. And I have a friend that works on her role is literally it's confidential role. She can't talk about anything she works on.
Sure.
And her background is in neuroscience and cognition. And she has a doctorate in that. So she's over there working on I don't know what, right? So I'll ask her like, well, how's it going? Oh, it's going great. Just really love it. We're really sort of off to the side a little bit in our group at Apple, working on these longer term things like what? Well, I can't really talk about it, which is
Yeah.
kind of, and of course you want to hear about it, right? Like
Yeah,
what?
it's
Tell me.
interesting.
It's
It's
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. In general, I think it's very suspicious that as if they're staying behind. I don't
Yeah,
believe
it
it.
is. No, they're not staying behind. Yeah, even there was a joke. I forgot that. I think I saw a skit the other day where they were joking about they said, what's the innovation on the iPhone 16? There's a new button for a camera. That's it? That's all you're working on? Obviously not. It's Apple, right?
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah,
something's going to happen. And even just because of the fact that they have the resources to do it, even if they don't have the talent, they have the resources and they have the market and they have the talents, and they could do it.
that's right.
And when I think about going back to what we said about who's going to dominate this domain, I feel I'm a bit worried because I'm just thinking about how big Apple right now is.
Yeah,
Like it's so huge and so powerful.
right.
And do they really need to gain more power? I don't think so, but nobody asked me.
Yeah, believe it or not, no one asked me either.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
seems like, when you're thinking about social media, if we were talking like 15 years ago, nobody would imagine it will be such a huge thing influencing political points of views and like
that's a
changing
great point.
society for
Yeah,
for
that's a
for
great
so.
point.
And now we are just in the beginning, like we're just in the, like when Mark Zuckerberg met these two guys and took everything from them. This is where we are in AI, the
That's
beginning of the story. And
the
we're trying to imagine what would be like 15, 10 years from now, and it's going to be so huge.
that's a great
And
point. I always I always like talking to you, Audie. You always make me think about things. You always give me
sure.
more to think.
Sure.
Yeah,
So now it's like I'm giving you homework. You need
that's
to go
right.
on.
That's right. Yeah, I got to go back. Yeah, yeah, but you're right. You're right. We're at that point where Zuckerberg took the idea and
Yeah.
quietly went back to his room and worked on
He
it.
did
Right?
whatever. Like the
Yeah,
beginning of the movie
yeah, that's
is
right.
now.
That's right.
Right. So what is your number one tip for leaders today?
Oh gosh, I think that's a good question. I think that one of the things that I would start by saying a couple of things I hate when people say, right? So I typically am not a guy that hates anything. I wouldn't. categorize myself that way. It's more like, as long as people have their own freedom to live their lives, right? And
Sure.
I support that, and I think everybody has some sort of unique and special talent that they can bring to bear on the world. So I think everybody's fairly equal that way in terms of, now not equal in every category, but equal in their own way. They have a special talent, right? The whole question is like for each of us, how do you find it? So I think that uh, what I hate to hear is when somebody overly identifies with a field or a role, like, well, I'm this person. And I might be feeling that way because we're raising money right now. So you have investors who go, well, I only invest in real estate, and it's like, well, real
Yeah.
estate's been kind of tough for like 5 years now, right? And
Right.
with interest rates up and costs up and rents can't keep going up because it hurts people, right? So you say, well, that's not really a great program this year. But I'm especially hearing that all the time right now. I'm this, or I only do that, or I identify this way. And so I think the challenge that there's a couple of challenges. Number one, like first of all, today, what is your core purpose or your core mission, right? So what problem are you trying to solve? What do you care about? Passionate, that the word gets overused, right? But it really is that
Yeah.
same question. Like what do you care enough about to work hard on to try to solve today? And that'll keep you and motivation is another kind of word that gets overused, right? But we're all looking for that. What's the thing we get excited about? I mean, I see it with you and the different things you're working on, and I think that's a good example to your listeners. And I think that everybody should find, what am I excited about first? Then, because that'll sustain you, right? You'll have to work hard anyway. Steve Jobs talked about that, I
Yeah.
think, in the Stanford speech, right? You got to work hard anyway.
Yeah.
Might as well
Right.
love what you're doing. Secondly, though, and this gets into like we were talking about religious ideas earlier, or at least spiritual ideas. This idea of sort of having these different circles of karma, right? And that's I'm no expert in that, but I've read about it, right? So you say like uh, you're getting closer theoretically as life goes on toward your core or your main mission, right? Or like why you're here. But you might have several roles as you go. So not getting stuck with like, well, now I'm a this. Oh, this doesn't work for me anymore. Now I'm that. And then, thinking about other, we're so quick to go back and say, well, that's what our grandparents did or our parents. And they had one career their whole life and then they got a pension. It was okay. That was one specific little moment in time, right?
Right.
Humans have only been around for 250,000 years. We only had that for like 80 years. Maybe you could go back to Middle Ages and say there were ideas of guilds, but even that wasn't that long in human history. Maybe it's been 1,000 years, right? Where
Right.
people had something they did and they always did that. So we have to really think that that's over right now. So how do you stay agile, adaptable? How can you embrace some core things that you care about and skills that you develop related to those things you're passionate about, while at the same time not getting stuck in a title or run round? You have to be able to pivot quickly and then also embrace lifelong learning, obviously. But everything's going to keep changing faster and faster. I mean, I wouldn't have,
Yeah.
5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you told me, hey, you're going to have somebody on your team that you're going to ask for a marketing report and they're going to go put it in Chat GPT and send it back to you in 5 minutes, and it's going to be 10 pages long, right?
Yeah.
I would have said, no, no way, no way, right?
Right.
Because really, for $20 a month, you've got you have an entire extra worker, right, or multiple extra workers.
Sure.
Um, that's an amazing technology, but obviously this is simple too. This is a very, very simple concept, but how do you prompt it? Are you getting the right material? So there are all these things to learn, and there will be all these things to learn for a long time, and that's how we want it to be because that's how we're going to advance. So when I think about, what do I want right now? I want to be able to enable the development of new technology, right, to solve societal problems and enable human flourishing, and not just in the United States, but around the world. Because as people are able to flourish more, you have a greater chance for peace, for understanding, and for people to reach their potential and feel more fulfilled. So that's how I think about, if I'm going back and I'm, having a bunch of calls with people, right, or we're trying to raise a fund or something. Why are we doing it? Well, it's for that. It's much bigger than just
Yeah.
We need to raise, this many millions of dollars for this fund,
Yeah,
So
you're
that's,
right.
yeah. So I think having that sense of vision or mission, as
Yeah.
you go through.
Yeah. I love the answer that is not like too technical. It's like a visionary view of what you're doing. And it reminds me like I'm each year I'm studying something and it has to be unrelated to what I'm doing. So 2 years ago, I studied ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. And
Mm,
it's a type of CBT therapy.
I
And
like it.
acceptance meaning we accept what we're going through and we're relating to our emotions, but the commitment part is the interesting part as I see it, because sometimes when you're thinking about therapy or technology, not technology but psychology, we're always thinking about being very empathic to what people are going through. And the commitment, what you're talking about, is the values that we have and we're aiming for. So it's not enough to accept whatever we're going through. We have a goal. We have a view of what we want to achieve. And in parallel to accepting what's going on in our lives, we need to achieve something, and we aspire to have something. And this is very important, to have some kind of a purpose or a mission for people. And once they have a mission, it's not about them. It's not that I need to be a CEO or I need to be
Yes,
successful. It's
that's
like,
right.
this is what I want to achieve. And once you're saying like, I want to make the world better, or help people to get to their full potential, or I want to help, I don't know, entrepreneurs to find a way to help these people.
Yes,
And once you have that in front of you, it's not you. And
right,
once it's
right.
not like I need to be the biggest investor, most successful investor, and make most money,
Right.
which could be a goal. It's not that I have anything against money, right? And I think it's too narrow, to hold you into that
It is.
direction.
It
And once
is.
you have this vision or a purpose, it keeps you more interested in the end result. And then you could be flexible with yourself. You could
That's
have
right.
this goal as an investor, as a mentor, as someone who's doing volunteering with entrepreneurs or with kids, whatever. It's like the
Yes,
same goal could be, you could aspire to be that in so many other ways. And then you don't have this, like, that is me and this is what I need to do.
that's right.
And when I'm thinking about AI, it's going to change the workforce for sure. It's going to change our world, our roles, the way that we interact with technology. How do we interact with each other? What would be the positions we would have in general, and our kids would have, and skills that they need? It's going to change. And once we're still curious and not afraid, we have the possibility to grow with it, instead of like collapsing into something which is too frightened and closed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that was beautiful the way you worded that. I think that when having the bigger mission, it's sort of like, I remember talking with somebody who was an expert public speaker, it was actually I was talking with him and a former president, actually, and these two guys were saying, when you go to give a speech, right? And this was when I was young. I was in my early 20s. When you go to give a speech to a group, said, don't think that the advice was, don't think about yourself for your performance. It's not a performance. You're not performing, you're
Yeah.
really, instead, think, what do they want? Like, what are they looking for out of this? How can I help them? And how can I be open? And so that idea of like, yeah, prepare so that you know your subject matter, but also be open to the moment, right? Don't rehearse it, don't memorize it, because then you're in the last moment. But be there with them and give them what they need. And they said it's more of a service.
Yeah.
And I mean, this president was an expert at walking in and not having any notes and just being able to go with wherever the crowd went. And so he would meet people beforehand, get their input, ask some questions. He'd like to get the early asked questions. What are they thinking about? What are they talking about? And then he'd say, I got a number of questions related to this, so let's start there. And he'd start in that direction. And then he'd watch like a conversation, listen to people and where were they going. But that way he was fully present and in a conversation and
Yeah.
not in a performance. And I think it's the same thing with the career, right? You're intuiting as you go, and you're trying to solve you're working to solve a challenge versus, you know, hit a milestone that's personal, or or about your performance or how you look or whatever else.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're not as aware of like self indulgent, like you're into yourself. And then
Yeah,
you could be natural
that's right.
and to be authentic with people. And when you're not like into what would they think? Do they think I'm
Right.
smart? And am I saying the
Right.
right thing? And in general, I do lots of public speaking. And for me, I always know that they will not, I think that Maya D'Angelo said it, I'm not sure, that people would not remember what you said, but they would surely remember how you made them feel.
Great quote.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that that's the quote, more or less the
Yeah.
quote.
That's right.
And
Right.
and I think that that is what's really important when you're talking to people in general or speaking in events. It doesn't matter. You need to be aware of where they are and how do
Yes.
they relate to what you're saying, which is the
Yes.
most important. Like listening is more important than talking.
Oh,
And the same
absolutely.
goes when you're just dealing with life or business or whatever. When you're tuned to outside, to listen and to be curious, to be aware of what could be empathic to other people, then you're getting more for yourself. It's like it's the other way around. Most people say like when you're thinking about yourself and you're very aware about yourself and you're really deeply thinking about what happened to you and your parents and what could happen, it makes you so anxious and too much self-aware that you're not really
Right.
capable of doing other things. And
Yes.
it's really important, surely for today, for people.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so Perry, it's been a pleasure talking to you as always. We should have more conversation because it's always fun. So
It
thank
is
you
always fun.
for coming. Thank you
Absolutely.
for being with me. It's been such an insightful talk, and I want to ask you, where could people hear more about your work and about your group?
Well, I'm people can find and connect with me on LinkedIn. That's an easy way. And we're always happy to meet more people and have more conversations with people that care about the same kinds of things that we care about.
Thank you, Perry. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Adi.
And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. And I see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See ya.
Bye bye.